Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's conversation on the Low No Drinker podcast, bringing you closer to the people, places, and brands leading the low, no, and light alcohol revolution. This week, I am delighted to finally be in conversation with the lovely Murray Patterson, founder of Muri. I've had requests from listeners and recommendations from brand founders to get this gentleman on the show and have a chat about his fantastic brand. And after several months of diary tennis from both of us, I'm very, very glad to say that it's finally happening. So what exactly is Muri? Well, I'm going to let Murray tell you in his own words shortly. But what I can tell you is that it is a very unique, handcrafted with care wine moment alternative that I highly recommend. It is made with passion to be accompaniment with food to help you enjoy those moments when you're looking for something that is adult but just doesn't happen to have any alcohol in it. So I'm going to bend his ear about his journey, about how the brand came to be, and a little bit about some of the background into the fermentation process and the production process, so that you can find out more about it. So thank you very much for joining me, Murray. How are you today, my lovely?
I am absolutely delighted to be here, Denise. Thanks very much for having me on. And I would say that we need to talk about getting you on as our marketing and comms consultant, because the way you described our drinks there was much better than anything I've ever come up with.
We can talk after the show, that's fine. No, but to be honest, this is just, I genuinely have. So I taste all the drinks of the people that come on the show, because obviously I need to know what I'm talking about. And I was blown away. I've only tasted 2 from the range and they're absolutely stunning and very, very unique. And I like getting brands founders on the show that bring something different, that isn't just your same old, because people are looking for so much character and quality and diversity in their non-alc drinks. And it's nice to speak to somebody who's doing that. So well done to you guys.
Cheers. Yeah, we're trying to bring a few new things to the party, so to speak. The old the old non-alc category is kind of driven by being a mirror image of alcohol. We're trying to kind of break free from that. I suppose is kind of that's our mission.
Well, I think you're definitely on the right path with that. So I always like to start by asking my guests to share some of their journey that led them to creating their brand. And then we'll jump into more about it itself. But we were talking just before we pressed record. You're in Copenhagen now, which is where Muri is produced. What was that journey that's led you to being in this position that you are now?
Well, I mean, I, as you can probably tell by the accent, I've spent most of my life in London. I was working in a variety of really kind of dreary corporate jobs, and I find my kind of crazy mind finds these office environments quite surreal. I was super down and wanted to go and pursue my passion in food and drink. And one day just quit and went off and tried to find my way into drinks. Ended up kind of falling into cider. Did a variety of jobs in the UK cider industry, everything from kind of picking apples in orchards through to doing a bit of import export, actually making the drinks. And it was there that I really kind of fell in love with fermentation. There's some amazing UK cider producers, particularly out in the West Country, who make drinks in every bit as excellent a way as classic winemakers, and seeing how they were doing it was kind of super inspiring for me. And I was looking around for where I could go and train with experts in fermentation on a kind of slightly more innovative level, just to kind of classic cider. And all roads kind of pointed towards Copenhagen. After doing my research, just Copenhagen kind of stands out as a place that has really become a kind of melting pot for not just gastronomy, but fermentation expertise particularly. And I guess it's really kind of down to this one restaurant that you'll almost certainly have heard of, called Noma. It's been one of the kind of standout restaurants globally for the last kind of 10, 20 years. And the kind of legacy that restaurant has had on the Copenhagen fermentation scene is amazing. And 2 alumni from Noma, the was the head of the test kitchen, this guy called Lars Williams, left Noma to start a spirits company called Empirical, and they were doing like crazy Noma-y things with foraged ingredients and weird fermentation techniques and weird kind of gastronomic ideas and applying it to booze. I thought that sounded really cool. Just so happened they were coming to London to do a tasting, and I went along and had a few drinks and managed to persuade Lars to give me a job, which was super weird given that I had absolutely zero distillery experience. But that was 7 years ago now. So went over to Copenhagen and kind of haven't looked back. And I would say kind of that training period, I worked at Empirical for just over a year, was kind of fundamental to the DNA of what I subsequently started up with Murray. So this kind of chef-led approach to building flavour, taking exceptional ingredients, many of them foraged, and working them like a chef might, including fermentation techniques, to try and get the best flavour possible. So that was the early thinking behind it.
That's quite a bold step. So you just sort of one day went, "That's it, I've had enough. I'm leaving the corporate world," and decided to venture onto pastures new. That shows. I think that kind of reflects in the boldness of your drinks. That must be just sort of innate in your character.
It wasn't through any degree of bravery, I might add. It was just through complete desperation. Like it was basically you're kind of at rock bottom, and there's no other option other than to do something completely different, just because you can't carry on. I was working in this bank, JP Morgan, up in Canary Wharf, and I was just sitting there. I physically can't do this anymore. It's too much. So it was a sense of kind of cowardly desperation rather than bravery, Denise.
I don't know. Because I think there are because a lot of research that I do, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, obviously for building Low No Drinker, and they're building the magazine and the podcast. So it's all about entrepreneurship and things. And you look at the numbers of the people that hate their jobs, or that they are sort of just fed up with their lives, but don't do anything about it. I think to take that step and go, do you know what? Screw this. I'm not doing this anymore. This is not working for me.
Yeah. There's always kind of a bit of a worry that you're going to be unemployed and you'll never find a job again. But I mean, I just resolved in my mind that it couldn't possibly be any worse. So I managed to do it, and it was great. I haven't kind of looked back. It was easily the best thing I've ever done. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. So tell me then how the concept, because obviously you've talked your way into this job. You've moved to Copenhagen because you're really excited about fermentation, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But how did that all lead to you going, right, I've decided that what I want to do with all of this interest and passion and excitement is make this brand of drinks for people?
I mean, I think Muri was initially actually conceived as an alcoholic drink. But I think having had an experience in the UK cider industry, which is very, very, very traditional, the no-low space just seemed like and I think this still is very, very true. It's a great place to innovate and try new things. And, as I was saying to you before, there's, I still think too much of the category is driven by being this mirror image of alcohol. Mm-hmm. And we haven't quite taken advantage of the fact that, the whole space is just this blank slate for trying new things. And, I've always wanted to start my own company. And I just thought the stuff that I'd learned at Empirical, and their kind of obsessive approach to flavour could make a compelling product for the no-low space, and kind of make things a bit more interesting and a bit more kind of flavour focused, rather than focusing on the non-alc quality per se. So there was kind of lots of strands kind of floating around about what we were going to do, but kind of condensed into this idea that we were going to try this in as a no-low drink. We still might do alcohol in the future, actually, to be honest. But the non-alc space is just it's perfect to try new, almost categoryless drinks at the moment. So yeah, it worked out quite well.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make about not everything needs to be a mirror image of alcohol, because you're right, in this space, it is almost like just a playground for people like you who kind of gone like, right, I've got this idea. What if I put this with this and I blended this together and I made this? What would that be like?
Yeah.
And you're not then constrained by centuries of tradition of this is how it has to be. And that allows you to make things that serve different needs for different people.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is doing this because they want to stay away from alcohol. Are you finding that with your what you're doing and the people that you're speaking to, that they are mostly sort of coming from a sobriety element, from a just wanting something different element? Who is it that Murray is reaching?
Great. I mean, a great question. I mean, at the moment, well, I would say initially our challenge was to make a product that drinkers wanted to try. So curious, one of our marketing personas is the curious foodie, and we try and speak to less people who are approaching it from a sobriety aspect, and more people who are probably more focused, more mindful in their drinking choices, and those who don't want to compromise on flavour, open to trying new things, and through those we're reaching a kind of broader audience of people who are sober for whatever reason. But yeah, our challenge is to make something compelling that even drinkers would want to try because it is delicious and sounds interesting and has a good kind of backstory to it.
I like that, making something compelling. And it does sound delicious and compelling. So before we go too far down that, tell me then, what exactly is Murray? Because as you said before about, things being categoryless, how do you describe your brand for people?
Oh, God, it's tough to me. I mean, you did a much better job of it earlier than I'm going to. I mean, it's a complex, non-alcoholic fermented drink designed to fit the wine occasion. But because that doesn't really necessarily roll off the tongue, we're more or less fixed at the moment on calling it a wine alternative.
Okay.
But I mean, from speaking to founders of other wine alternative brands, everyone hates these terms. I mean, no one really wants to be known as a wine alternative because we end up putting so much work into making the drinks taste nice, and our drinks don't taste anything like wine, and you don't want to be known as a kind of substitute, as it feels like it's kind of lesser version of something else. So there's so much chat going around between the founders in our category about can we come up with a name that's a bit better than wine alternative or proxy or substitute or whatever. But we haven't managed it yet, Denise.
Okay,
so
that was my question.
is what it is. But I mean, really, it's just we're just trying to make a drink that kind of can fit this wine occasion. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say, as I say, they don't taste anything like wine. So that it's really tough. It's a really tough part of the growth of the category. Actually, is kind of figuring out what we actually call this.
It is, the language is, because it's so important, isn't it? That people can use words that they recognize and that they understand to find your drinks, and that they know when they're supposed to use it. But if you do, you're right, if you do call it a wine alternative, you put that word wine in someone's head and they're going to go in going, okay, well, totally. I like a Cab Sav. Is this like a Cab Sav? You're like, no, it's not the same thing. Yeah,
totally. I mean, we when we first started, we kind of consciously tried to pick ingredients that would mimic wine. So we used things like oak chips, and we even thought about using tobacco at one point, and that we canned that pretty quickly. But you know how the words people use to describe wine, we were kind of using those ingredients to leather and things like that. And it just didn't work for us, and it kind of felt like disingenuous, really, to try and copy wine in any way. I love drinking wine, and it's a big source of inspiration. But I kind of almost have too much respect for it to try and copy it, if that makes sense. So increasingly, more and more, we're creating drinks that are getting further and further away from that wine flavour profile. And it feels, as we're doing that in terms of the flavours, we also need to do that in terms of the terminology. So trying to figure out how we can come up with a category definition that doesn't mention the W word is tricky. Yeah,
It is because, what do you do? How do you communicate that? And then the thing is, they always say the best thing to do is to ask your consumer, ask your customer. But unfortunately, consumers don't have the answers either, because they're like, well, I like wine, so I want something that's like a wine.
yeah.
And then you want them to be able to go into a shop or online or to search it and know what words to put in. And like you said, it's a very thorough description. But, a fermented drink for those wine occasions with complexity and depth is a really long tail keyword.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Yeah. I mean, we really struggle with it. I mean, our drinks are kind of, we'll probably get into it, but I mean, they're quite complex to make, and we're using a ton of different fermentation techniques and tons of different ingredients. And, I feel sorry for the sommeliers who are kind of pouring it in the restaurants, because, I mean, you're kind of standing there. You could be standing there for 10 minutes kind of talking about it, and it's actually trying to distill that into a quick, digestible message is something I know everyone struggles with.
Okay. Well, let's talk about these drinks themselves then. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube behind me, you can see a couple of bottles from the Muri range. So I'd love, Murray, for you to take us a bit through the range, or we can start with these ones here if you like, because I've tasted these two, and my absolute favourite, I've got to make sure I pick up the right bottle now, is this one.
Oh, it was amazing.
I've picked up the bottle that's open, so I've got to be really careful that I don't spill it anywhere. So this is a strawberry, tomato, and smoked vanilla drink, and it's absolutely unique. I have never tasted anything like it.
Cool.
How did you come up with that? I mean, let's start there.
Yeah, and this was probably our hardest one to make. It's a collaboration that we did with a wonderful chef called Anne-Sophie Peake, who's the most Michelin-starred woman in the world. I think she's got something like absolutely ludicrous, like 12 Michelin stars. Wow. In restaurants all over the place. She is a wonderful woman, true inspiration to us, and has been, well, her sommelier actually has been a big supporter of what we've been doing. Nice. And we just asked if we could do a collab. We love doing collabs with other chefs and gastronomic personalities. It keeps us kind of fresh. We're nerds at the end of the day. So we love kind of nerding out with other nerds. And she just wanted something exceptional for her guests as an aperitif, and we tried a bunch. It took us 3 years on the R&D, but we tried a bunch of things and came up with this idea of strawberries and cream. And so it's a good example of actually how we kind of apply gastronomic chef technique to drinks. Actually, so we take Danish strawberries and ferment them in 3 different ways with a yeast. We kind of carbonically macerate them, or kind of explode them almost in CO2. And then we lacto-ferment strawberries as well. So we kind of got a kind of 3-way strawberry fermentation that forms the basis of the drink. We get a creaminess in there by acidulating yogurt to separate the solids from the liquid. Okay. And we use we caramelize that whey that we then macerate in the strawberry wine. And then we give it a bit of umami depth. We're trying to get a bit of the strawberries and cream is obviously super fun. We try and get a bit of like umami smokiness. So we crush cherry tomatoes and then freeze them. And then as they thaw, we take the clarified tomato essence that we ferment with the yeast to turn into a kind of tomato wine that we blend with the strawberries. It gives this kind of, just gives it a bit of depth to it. And then we smoke some vanilla pods over some beechwood and macerating. It gives a kind of little bit of grown upness, which is needed because I think most people, if they taste it, do you remember when you were a kid, did you ever have those like pissy Faloo yogurts?
Oh yeah.
Everyone says it tastes like them. They're like, oh, it's pissy Faloo. I don't think Anne-Sophie Peake having 12 Michelin stars was necessarily too chuffed.
That's not what she was going for, no?
yeah, exactly. So it just gives it a bit of kind of grown up character. But I mean, it's a fun one. It's like strawberries and cream in a drink.
Yeah,
I mean, literally. So that's our most recent drink, and the kind of toughest to make.
That's really. I mean, you said a lot of words there that sounded really, really technical and like. It sounds like you're doing sort of. I've got visions of like a scientific lab, and you're sort of exploding things with CO2, and you're blending and mixing things together. It sounds like you're just having like loads of fun with like strange ingredients and see what comes up with.
That's it. It's yeah. As I say, we're the whole team. We're a bunch of chefs basically. I'm the only one who's not. Okay. I was a distiller, but we're just complete food nerds, and we just love geeking out with these new things. But I mean, there is the kind of theory behind it is, I know as a former alcohol distiller, it's much easier to make booze taste nice and get like a weight of flavour. Alcohol both like absorbs and delivers flavour so much better than water, that you've got to work much harder to make non-alcoholic drinks taste nice. So, this idea that we're applying everything that we know as chefs and distillers and people who've worked in restaurants to try and get the best out of the ingredient and get a kind of concentration of flavour. That's kind of why we do the crazy stupid shit that we do, to try and to try and get this depth to it.
I love that. And I love it. It reminds me of something that I read on your website, which I'm just going to read here, which says, at Muri, we use different liquids for specific purposes relating to taste and structure. And it says, we carefully piece these together to build up layers of flavour, funk, and complexity. And I love it. You're bringing the funk.
Yeah, I mean, the blending idea kind of really is derived from when I was working in cider. Cider makers blend different varieties of fermented apple together to have a bitter one, a sour one. They'll piece them together to kind of build up something that's kind of complex and whole. And then I was working at Empirical, and that they obviously fractionalize things through distillation, and then blend things together. So we kind of view it almost as kind of like piecing together a wall using different bricks of flavor to try and create something that has a kind of dynamism of flavor, is hitting all your kind of taste receptors, and feels kind of alive in the mouth.
I love that. Tell me about what else is in the range then. So that was my favorite one there, but what else have you got?
See, they're quite long. It's quite a long-winded description to kind of say what they're about. The other one you've got behind you there is the Four Horsemen collab. Four Horsemen's a restaurant in Brooklyn. It's kind of well known in America for its like amazing wine list. So we were like super fortunate to do a collab with them. It's also owned by LCD Sound System for any of you old ravers out there. And that's it's Danish sour cherries that we make into a wine. We had some lacto-fermented beetroot. We actually had the same tomato wine that's in the Anne-Sophie Peake one, and it's got a water kefir with some bay leaf and green peppercorn. So it's a bit like a kind of Cabernet Franc style, a little bit peppery, nice silky texture. The reds are very hard to do, because as soon as you see something that's red in your glass, you're expecting that kind of like weight
Yeah.
So we're really pleased with how that one came out. It still has a kind of nice mouthfeel and texture. But the other ones, so that's two. So we've got another 4 in the range that are all kind of similar blends of local berries and some forage botanicals. So we quite often go into the woods. It's still winter, so we haven't been out yet this year, but in a month or so we'll start heading into the woods to start getting botanicals that we then dry and use in the drinks as well. But then we started to mess around with rice and sake and amazake styles, which are working really well for us. Really delicious. So we cook rice and we'll grow this mold called koji on it that turns it into sake more or less, and start blending that rice with other different components as well. So we're really looking to kind of other parts of the world for inspiration, and not just doing the same thing using kind of Danish berries, which is what we've been doing up to now, trying to look to places like South America, Africa, and Asia for kind of new ideas and inspiration for different non-alcoholic drinks that we can start experimenting with.
Exciting. I wanted to ask you, you used the term lacto-fermented a couple of times. In layman's terms, what is fermentation and how is it used to produce these drinks?
I mean, that's a complex. I mean, fermentation to us is just a tool to make stuff taste nice. So we harness the power of microorganisms to create flavor, and we use multiple different types of culture to do that. So we use yeast commonly. We use a wine yeast that doesn't really produce any alcohol in all our drinks. That's great. It produces kind of like Sauvignon Blanc kind of flavors. It doesn't produce any booze. We use symbiotic cultures of bacteria and yeast. So the yeast will eat the sugar and poop out alcohol, and then the bacteria will turn the alcohol into acids. We lacto ferment things, so we kind of salt cure ingredients to kind of make them sour and umami, like sauerkraut, for example, or kimchi. We'll pickle things, so we take in one of our drinks, sherbet daydream, we pickle rhubarb, and then we use the rhubarb in a wine, and then we also add a bit of the pickle liquor to kind of bump the acidity. So we're using a ton of different types of fermentation to try and get some complexity. Fermented stuff's generally, fermentation makes stuff delicious. I think I certainly didn't before I started off in drinks. I didn't actually realize how widely fermentation is used to make pretty much everything that tastes delicious. So,
you mentioned a lot of amazing ingredients. Obviously, you've talked about strawberries, you've talked about foraging, your rhubarb, which I absolutely love. Talk to me a little bit about the connection with what you're doing and with food, because obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, food is a big part of life in Copenhagen, and you've got amazing restaurants that are world-renowned for what they do. I know it's important to you guys, right, that your bottles can complement that dining experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, that there seems to be a real obsession in our category, the wine alternative category, for like making sure the drinks can pair with foods. And just from chatting with winemakers, it's funny because they would never, when you're making a wine, you would never think really about how it would match with the dish. And to be honest, I don't really think we do either. The challenge is to get a concentration of flavor, I think, that allows it to pair with food. It's as I was saying, it's pretty hard to do that in non-alc drinks. And I don't necessarily think we have a particular food in mind when we're making something. but we have in mind that we need to get it flavourful enough
Yeah.
that people will be able to enjoy it with food.
Yeah.
We were thinking of trying to make a drink from fish to pair specifically with fish. But it was absolutely rank, so we canned that idea. It was made with like fish bones and seaweed, and that was one of the many failed experiments that we did. But other than that, we've never really specifically kind of tried to match anything.
Well, I mean, I chuckle, but isn't it whale bladder that's used in traditional wines to sort of still them or something? So I suppose it's not that far off, although it sounds a little bit more soupy than winey.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's when I was at Empirical, we made a spirit from oysters. We chucked oysters into booze and then distilled down. It was absolutely delicious. It's harder to do without the alcohol, sadly.
Yeah. I can imagine. If we may change track just a little bit. So you're in Copenhagen. You told me earlier on that you've been there for 7 years, that you said.
Yeah.
I'm always interested. I call those who participate in the Low No Drinker platforms Low No Nation, because this is a worldwide thing that's going on. I'm always interested when I get people on who are in different places to find out a little bit of what the low no and light alcohol scene is like where they are. I told you before that I did go to Copenhagen once years and years ago with my boyfriend at the time. He's now my husband. We did break up on the trip, but it all turned out okay because we're now married.
That's going to be a sad story.
But there was a lot of full strength boozing involved for us at that time. So I don't really recall what the scene is like. What's it like for Low No and Light over there?
It's buzzing, Denise. Yeah, I mean, it's got a great scene. I mean, you'll have heard of Ish. Mm-hmm. I think they're one of the biggest globally. They're doing really well. Copenhagen sparkling tea is doing fantastically all over the world. I think they're doing really great in Asia now, but they started off here. And then there is a bunch of really great, very grassroots kombucha producers making really great kombuchas out of foraged ingredients from the woods around here. I think the scene in general is excellent. The restaurants here take it super seriously. I would say probably the majority of the really good ones now have the non-alc pairing priced similarly or at the same level as the alc one. People kind of like have this non-binary approach to working their way through a night's drinking alcohol and non-alcohol wines, sakes, different things. And I think there's a kind of maturity to the scene here that is really nice. That I guess this kind of mindful approach to dipping in and out of alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks.
How do you feel it compares when you come back to the UK in terms of sort of like what you can find in places and people's attitude towards it?
Similar, I would say. I mean, I think London to me has the most mature non-alc scene in the world that I've seen. Bit of a shame because it means we're kind of struggling to break into it, to be honest. I wouldn't say Copenhagen's far behind. I would say Copenhagen, probably the majority of non-alc producers here are more focused on craft, particularly in the kombucha category. So there's a lot. If you go into restaurants around here, you'll see a lot of like hand-painted bottles from a producer that's making it in his basement, and some of it's very, very good. So more kind of niche, small producers, I think, are really kind of interesting, doing interesting things.
Talk to me a bit more then about that mission to sort of break into or get more spread here in the UK, because your drinks are obviously very restaurant compatible. How are you finding it trying to get it into the hands of consumers here in the UK so that they can try it?
Yeah, I mean, Brexit didn't make it particularly easy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's been a challenge
Yeah.
for everyone trying to get into. It's a bit sad, really, because I always wanted to get more of my bottles into the UK, but it's a challenge for our distributor. So, I mean, the way we're set up at the moment, we use kind of mainly natural wine distributors in each country. So we've got a small natural wine distributor in London, and we're just trying to focus whilst we're still super small on getting nice placements in good restaurants around in London and other cities around England to begin with. But we haven't kind of got to a stage where we're going to really go beyond that into kind of larger retail. So, I mean, we're still small in the UK compared to other places at the moment, but hopefully we'll solve that over the.
Like you say, it's a big market. You know, there's so much available and so much for people to try, which is it's a great thing. You know, it's wonderful that people have choice. And I do wish that it was easier for more quality stuff to get around, though, because as with anything, you know, in a fledgling category, there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out all at once, and some of it's going to be great and
Yeah,
fantastic, and some of it perhaps not so much.
yeah,
And I'd love to see a brand like yours to be able to get more reach and get more exposure and get in more liquid on lips, as they say.
yeah. I mean, I think it's getting better as there's more people targeting the premium part of the market. I mean, as I'm sure you know, all you and all your listeners know, I mean, there is a challenge for non-alc producers in terms of being able to set a fair price. I still think there's like way too much. There's too much of a common perception that non-alc drinks should be cheaper.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting the best possible ingredients. We're working them super hard. We're doing far more than a winemaker probably would to create this kind of craft product. And being able to charge a price that allows you to continue business is a challenge in the non-alc category. But I think, you know, there's more of us now aiming for that real premium part of the market, which is really good, and that will bring kind of momentum, I hope, more broadly in our
Yeah.
category to grow.
It's interesting you mentioned that sort of premiumization approach, because I'm noticing now more and more there are more brands in the low no space that are, I don't think separating is the right word, but that are distinguishing themselves as a more premium product. And it's quite interesting because obviously just a few years ago it was just one big melting pot of products. It's like, okay, look, just make stuff and get it out there. And now we're at the stage where we can actually say that this is slightly different. This is a next level up. Was that
Yeah,
always a goal for you to be a more premium, high end, for want of a better word, product?
yeah. I mean, I just to me, it's easier conceptually to design a drink that's as the best thing you could possibly make.
Yeah.
That's an easier way of making something rather than going, oh, I want to fit into this kind of price bracket,
Okay.
which means I need to make these kind of compromises and use these ingredients. That's more of a headache, I reckon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're just focused on making it absolutely, like, without compromise, the best thing that we can make. So, you know, that narrows us down to kind of the top end of the market. But yeah, I mean, I think I really I'm loving seeing just more people doing craft stuff. So I think it's something that's really been missing from the night category. Where if you start as a startup, quite often you'll get someone else. You know, you outsource it, you'll get someone else to make it for you. So you're kind of compromising really on product control there. You know, margins are so tight, you're trying to use kind of cheaper ingredients. And it's great to see more people now kind of drawing a line in the sand, going, right, I'm going to make this myself. I'm going to get skilled people in to make it. I'm going to get the best possible ingredients. I'm going to make this in an expert artisanal craft way. And it, you know, there's more and more people popping up doing that. You know, Silva, Bativo, Amar in Spain. You know, real proper craftsmanship going into these drinks, which the more of that we can get in the category, I think the better.
Absolutely. Very well said. Speaking of, getting your liquid on lips and getting it out to everybody, let's tell Low No Nation where they can find Muri, either here in the UK and some of the other markets you're in, because you're not just here and in Copenhagen, are you? In a few other places too.
Yeah, I mean, well, the easiest places, sorry, excuse me, the easiest place is on our website, murray-drinks.com. If you order 6 bottles, you get free shipping. In London, probably the best places to get it from our distributors, Sager and Wine.
Okay.
They're based in Hackney, but they do shipping as well. And then we are in most European countries, I would say. And then where are we outside of Europe? We're in the States. You'll find us in New York, particularly, and we're in Singapore.
Excellent.
So starting off global expansion, step by step.
Love it. Yeah, there's a lot of people that listen to this show who are in the States. So,
wicked.
Yeah, no, yeah. Absolutely. And I'm sure they'll be really intrigued to go and find you. So I'll make sure that's all in the show notes. Murray, it's been really interesting talking to you, and it's a fascinating way that you're approaching things. Before I let you go, it's time for my final question, which is one that I ask everybody who comes on the show. And actually, this question, one of the previous guests that were on the show gave your brand as an answer to this question, which is how I first came across you. And I was trying to remember it before, but you mentioned it was Amma Brewery when I interviewed them.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
So let's imagine, I know that the weather isn't very sunny at the moment, although we're getting there, but cast your mind forward to a nice, lovely sunny day and you're off to a barbecue at a friend's house. And on that day, you're choosing not to drink full strength alcohol and you're bringing something with you in the low, no or light range to enjoy. What else, other than the amazing, amazing Muri bottles, do you like to enjoy when you're not drinking full strength?
I don't know if you can get it in the UK, but Tool is a brewery in Denmark that make the best sour. So Denmark's famous for sour beers, and they make these amazing sour fruit beers that almost drink like a wine. They don't actually de-alcoholize it. They actually use the same yeast that we use, but they ferment these sour beers out with this beautiful yeast, and it's kind of like it's almost drinking like a strawberry wine or something. So Tool non-alc beers are, in my opinion, absolutely delicious. I'd probably take along a Beetivo and soda maybe. Close to being my absolute favourite is my mate Gregor, who makes rapscallion soda.
Okay.
Up in Scotland, he makes these wonderful grown-up sodas out of delicious. He's a proper craftsman as well. Makes amazing adult sodas up in. I believe he's somewhere up in Glasgow. But they're amazing. I would crush those all day long.
Good choices. I've heard of rapscallion. I haven't had the pleasure of trying them yet, but I need to get that into my repertoire. And what was how do I spell that Tool?
Tool is Tool.
Okay.
My dad. I've been in Denmark 7 years. I still can't speak the language properly. But, Tool. They're the best non-alc beers I've ever tried. They're great.
Wow.
Some of those.
Amazing. I will add those to the links in the show notes so that people, if they happen to be nearby, can go and try them or at least go and check them out online.
Yeah.
Murray, it's been really interesting talking to you and finding out a bit more about the processes that go into your very, very unique wine moment drinks. And I love the mission that you're on. And I think you're right. We need to work together to manage this language and manage expectations and really get people understanding how they can enjoy these drinks without comparison or without, coming in with expectations that don't belong. But your drinks are absolutely amazing. And I highly recommend anybody who's looking for something unique to go and give them a try. Thank you for joining me.
Bless you, Denise. Thanks a lot for having me. Cheers.